Look, I'm tired of us trying to demonize other people who hold different beliefs. And I'm not saying that there aren't beliefs that matter and that need to be expressed. I'm definitely not saying that I'm innocent in this. But I think this needs to be said. And I do want to go back for a moment to COVID for a couple of reasons. Because there's a lot of bitterness there. And there's reason for it. And yes, we can say, hey, what does this, when we're arguing with someone about what happened to Alex Pretti, and, someone brings up COVID, or, because we're arguing really about ICE in general, and the overreaching, the overstepping, the over-authoritarianism of the federal government. And people say, well, what about COVID? I understand two wrongs don't make a right. I understand that COVID has very little to do with this situation, especially since COVID is essentially a situation that's done. But it's not really done, is it? Because we all lived through it. We were all impacted by it in multiple ways. Some people were impacted by it because they did lose loved ones, because they were afraid for themselves and people they loved. Others were impacted by it because they felt that their freedoms as an American citizen were taken away and that the federal government overstepped by policing our day-to-day actions, which as Americans, we believe, as a nation, by and large, are our own personal decisions, with certain very non-controversial limitations that we all agree on that make society better. But by and large, how we proceed in our day-to-day affairs is our own business. And although that mindset comes with certain risks, we believe largely as a nation that it's worth those risks to have freedom, to live in a country where we can experience freedom, and not just in some sort of dreamy, theoretical, warm, fuzzy feeling way, but in a way that is tangible for all of us, and that shapes the way we go about our daily lives, that shapes the way we move through our own communities, our nation, and even our world. Because the dominant place that America has held for so long is impacted, partially at least, by the perception worldwide of America as a place of freedom. With freedom comes things like excitement, possibility, opportunity, growth, tragedy even. But we know we live in this incredible place where almost anything can and does happen. There's something vast about it. There's something captivating about it. And that's why America, besides being a military power and besides doing some things that are very controversial and worth discussing at a deeper level and worth evaluating, but besides all of that, the mystique that we have held in the world because of this image, this idea of freedom, is, I think, significant to the place that America holds in the world, both in reality and in the world's collective imagination. And the cost of infringing on that freedom may be more vast than we can really understand. And that applies when it is ICE infringing on the rights of American citizens in their own communities, which, make no doubt, has been happening. And I can point you to videos that prove it is happening. They might not be the videos that you're seeing on your news feed because of your algorithms and what you believe in and what you support, but I promise you it is happening. But I want to acknowledge for a second, because there is still bitterness here and there is still healing that needs to happen here, that I did not see the videos that prove the situations that you care about, because my algorithm is different than yours. And so while I want you to see and understand the things that I am seeing and understanding about the way that our freedoms are at risk, and in some places are actively being trampled in certain areas, certain places in the United States, well, I want you to understand that. I want you to know that I recognize that I know about those things because they are the things that are being put in front of me by my algorithm based on what I've shown interest in and interacted with in the past. And I know that you're seeing different things. And my first knee-jerk reaction to whatever you're seeing and whatever you care about is, whatever, I'm not seeing that. It's doesn't seem that important to me. And that's not okay. I do want to hear you out on the ways that you've been impacted. I wasn't that impacted by COVID. I didn't wear a mask. I had to have some uncomfortable conversations with family members who had a difference of opinion about that. And thankfully, those family members and I were able to leave it at, we disagree. Thank you for caring about me. Thank you for voicing your concerns from a place of care and love for me, but we disagree. So please respect my decision to not wear a mask and to continue to go to the places in public that I want to go to when I want to go to them. And please understand, it's not because I don't care about you or how you feel. And it's not because I don't care about others or because I want this disease to spread. And I don't think it's because I'm unintelligent or have suddenly forgotten how to use my intelligence. It is what I believe when I factor in all of the things that inform me about my beliefs. This is what I've landed on, and I might be wrong, but I'm sticking to it. And I will happily have a discussion with you, and I'll hear you out. But don't expect me to change, and don't see whether I change my viewpoint or my actions as an indication of how much I care or don't care about you. And I probably didn't ever express it that well at that time, but that's the gist of how I felt. And I have respect for people who made different decisions than I did. And I have respect for people who were even more adamant about not wearing a mask than I was. I think the right for the individual to decide how best to proceed for themselves is indeed their individual right. And even though our actions affect others to some extent, that is the reality of living in a complex, messy, but exciting and incredible world. And it's what we have. But I did not understand deeply enough how many people were impacted in very negative ways. I did not lose my job because I refused to take the vaccine. And I don't think it was right for anyone to face that prospect. Maybe in the medical profession, maybe acting under its own guidance rather than a mandate from a political entity, i.e. the federal government, maybe. But government jobs, including the military, because people didn't want to take a vaccine that had been recently developed, that had not had enough time in production and in administration for people to really understand what it was they were putting into their body by taking the vaccine, because the vaccine may, and this was up for debate, up for logical, intelligent debate, the vaccine may prevent you from getting COVID, but it may not. It may reduce the symptoms of COVID if and when you did get it, or it may not. But we do know is that if you don't get COVID, you don't face the consequences of having COVID. If you choose to get the vaccine, you do face the consequences of having the vaccine, whatever those are. And you can debate. There's room for intelligent debate about what exactly those consequences are and whether they're worth it or not. But what you do know is that you are making the choice to inject something into your body in the hopes that it has a payoff, with some of the scientific community saying that it will have that payoff. But it was still a new, quickly developed technology. Do you see how reasonable that sounds in retrospect? Do you see how reasonable it sounds in retrospect for someone to say, hey, I understand that COVID is a real thing, because most people, we're not going to paint people all as COVID deniers. Most people said, I understand it's a real thing. I understand it's a dangerous, even a deadly thing. I understand there's a risk here, but I would rather take that risk than accept the certainty of injecting this, whatever exactly it is, that I hope my government and the agencies, the big the big pharmaceutical agencies that the government worked with or relied on to develop this, I'm going to hope for the best, that it's the right thing. I just don't want, I don't have enough information. I don't have enough time to make this decision. I'd rather take my risk than have the certainty of injecting this. And I don't want to be called unintelligent for that. And I don't want, certainly, to lose my job or my livelihood, my profession, everything I've worked for, because I hold that opinion and put my money where my mouth is. We're going to turn back towards Alex Pretti in a minute and towards ICE enforcement in general. But I think it's really important to start there, because it's not enough to just brush aside when someone says, well, what about COVID? What about how the federal government acted and put restrictions on us during COVID? It's not enough to just say, what's that have to do with anything here? Forget about it. Deal with it. It's in the past. It's over. No. That's what I'm tired of. I'm tired of us jumping down each other's throats in order to make the conversation go more quickly, in order to get to that point where we just definitively prove our point and move on. Because until we actually hear what other people have to say and what matters to them, there is no proving our point. Because if they treat us the same way, we're not getting anywhere. I need to treat other people the way I want to be treated. I have not always done a good job of that. I have not even done a good job of it in my comments and content about this situation recently. Let me try to put the Alex Pretti and the ICE stuff in general in similar terms. we understood when COVID was happening that there was a real threat. There was a real disease. It was, in fact, extremely dangerous and deadly. The death toll was obviously far higher than the death toll from actions and illegal, unlawful, immoral actions taken by immigrants in our country. Every life that's been lost, including the dozen or more lives lost at the hands of dangerous, illegal, criminal immigrants. And that's not me conceding that there's a higher rate of crime from illegal or from immigrants, because factually and statistically that's not true. Factually and statistically, the crime rate amongst the immigrant population in the United States is slightly lower per capita than it is among natural born citizens. That's just facts. But every single crime that harmed an American citizen that could have been prevented by recognizing and removing that threat through the legal, proper, and appropriate means of deportation. Obviously, every life impacted or lost through our failure to do that is sad and tragic. And so is every life lost due to COVID or any other cause, especially when that life is lost too soon. So let's acknowledge there's real cause here. There's real cause to want to take action. Just like there was real cause to want to take action to prevent all preventable deaths due to COVID, there's reasonable cause to want to take action to remove dangerous immigrants from our country. And it would be unwise to hastily and make a blanket statement and defend just not removing anybody at all. But just like with COVID, one of the things that somebody said that really stuck with me, I don't even remember what politician it was, but they said, it seems that the cure is worse than the disease, or the cure is worse than the problem. And there are people recognizing that with the way that ICE is currently operating. And it needs to be said. And at this point, it doesn't need to be sugar-coated, and we don't need to continuously deflect from it. We need to acknowledge the importance of admitting that this isn't a singular issue, that civil rights matter when it's a Republican administration in power that is infringing on them, and the civil rights matter when it's a Democrat-run administration in power infringing on them. Civil rights are something that apply to all Americans, that are foundational to who we are, that are so ingrained in us that we take them for granted. They are instinctive, and we instantly recognize when they're being taken away from us, if they're being taken away by the people we don't like. We need to learn to recognize it when they're being taken away by the people we do like, too. How much we like a politician should be dependent on how that politician acts, and we should be constantly able to evaluate that for the purpose of correcting them, not even for the purpose of jumping immediately to their removal from office, because we have to remember that we hold the power. The people hold the power, and we can and should tell our elected officials what we expect from them. And on certain issues we may be divided, on certain issues we may have differences of opinion, but on some issues we should be a unified voice, saying, hey, you can dispute this and that, but this is not up for dispute. All Americans, or almost all Americans, feel this way about this issue. So if you want our trust and if you want our vote, get it together. Because I would rather have somebody of either political party. I actually am not registered with either party. I have not voted in the last couple of elections. Be mad at me if you want. But I really believe that what matters more than who's in office is how we, as individuals and as people, direct them, because they are our public servants, not the other way around. So we need to be able to recognize it and care about it when it's when it's the people we voted for, and not just constantly say, well, your party did this, your candidate did that, so why does that, okay, like, let's bring that up, let's talk about it, but not in a, so I'm not going to care about this issue matter, but in a, so can we please care about both issues manner. The cure is becoming worse than the disease with the way that ICE enforcement is being handled. And I'm going to ask you to please, if you are able to recognize, if you're able to see through the BS, if you're able to cut through the crap with COVID rhetoric, and you're able to see, like, this is the demonization part of it, right? Because the rhetoric that was used at that time was, well, if you don't want to get the vaccine, if you don't want to wear a mask, then you hate the elderly, you hate the vulnerable, you don't want to work cooperatively towards a solution to this issue, you are unintelligent, right? All sorts of really harsh, demonizing things. And it wasn't okay. It wasn't okay then. And I felt some of that. I didn't speak loudly about the issue, so I probably didn't feel it as hard as some other people did. And I apologize to you now for that, because I should have stood up and spoken a little bit louder at that time, and I should have taken a little bit more of the flack, and I should have stood up for freedom a little bit stronger than I did. At this time, I want to ask you to at least see, maybe not to be loud and vocal about it, because like I said, I can't ask what I didn't provide. I can't ask you to do things that I didn't do. I wasn't loud and vocal about COVID, but I did see that even though there's good rhetoric, even though there's a real need, even though it's being sold to us and packaged well as this caring, important thing, the enforcement, the application of it, the way that the federal government is using this to control people, whether that was the intent or not, is wrong. And that's exactly what's happening now. The intention is good. Removing the stated intention. And again, don't trust that your government always has the exact intention as what it states. But the stated intention is good. Remove dangerous, illegal immigrants from this country. That stated intention is good. But what's being done, what's actually being done, matters. And I hope that you will hear the people who are seeing it like I did hear you back when it was something else. There are endless videos now of the rights of U.S. citizens being ignored, being trampled, people being detained on their own porch for filming, which is their right to do. And in fact, it's something we should all want to be done, because then we don't have to speculate about what's happening. We don't have to take anyone's word for it. If it's on film, we can see it ourselves. I'm not going to include any of those videos here because I don't want to edit this down, and because that's not the tone that I intended for this video. If you want them, get in touch with me if you seriously want them. But there's endless evidence of these agents infringing people's American constitutional rights, and that's not okay in this country. So let's focus on the big issue first. Let's focus on that needs to stop. And then we can have a conversation about, if there's anyone still protesting once that does stop, because 99% of people will tell you they're not protesting immigration enforcement. They're protesting the infringing of the rights of American citizens and the intimidation and everything else that they're experiencing that's actually wrong. So let's see. Let's stop those things. Let's make it clear to this administration that we want those things to stop. And then let's see if they're still protesters. And then we can have a conversation about whether their protesting is beneficial or is wrong or is obstructing a legitimate process or is whatever. But let's start with the big issue, because this is still America. And more than somebody getting mad about something and saying so in an obnoxious way that I don't like, keeping our freedoms intact is so much more important. So let's focus on the big issue first. And let's not demonize each other in the process, right? And this is what I mean by that. Just like during COVID, if you didn't want to get the shot, it didn't mean you hated old people. It didn't mean you wanted people to die. It didn't mean you don't care about anybody. It doesn't mean you don't trust scientists. It doesn't mean you're unintelligent. It doesn't mean any of those things. Well, let me tell you what being opposed to the way that ICE is currently operating does not mean. It does not mean that you like having murderers and rapists living in your town, your city, your state, or even your country. It does not mean that you want bad people around. It doesn't even mean that you want illegal immigrants at all. It does not mean, it certainly does not mean that you do not care about the several, potentially dozen or couple of dozen American citizens who have been killed by violent illegal immigrants. It does not mean you do not care about them. It doesn't mean that you don't want action to be taken before the next time it happens. Not just, and we need to be able to say this too. I've seen too much of that person, we're not speaking up about this because that person received justice. Justice doesn't bring the person back who was killed or harmed. It doesn't undo the harm. And so we need to be a little bit more bold, and I'm talking to those of us who recognize the excess and the overstepping by ICE under the direction of this administration. But I'm talking to us, we need to go a little bit further and be able to say, let's make sure that we get dangerous, criminal, illegal immigrants, aliens, out of this country before that kind of tragedy happens. Let's recognize the signs. Let's pursue people that we have any indication to believe might be dangerous to our country, and let's not paint it as evil or completely uncompassionate or, some sort of terrible thing to even discuss removing all illegal immigrants from the country, or having a more nuanced discussion about that, at least, of letting our guard down a little bit, if you have it up, to an intelligent argument for removing illegal aliens from our country, even if they have never committed any other crime. Just like with COVID, I think there are intelligent people on both sides of that debate, and there are compassionate people on both sides of that debate, because we should not imagine that America is the only possible place that someone could have a good life. That's some kind of arrogance that we don't need to bring into the situation. I know it's heartbreaking and tragic to see someone who has lived in a place for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And it is complicated when, someone who was an illegal immigrant now has, children and grandchildren who were born in this country, who are citizens of this country. But there's still an intelligent, honest conversation we can have about that. It is messy, it is complicated, it is heartbreaking in some cases, but we should be able to have an honest conversation about that without demonizing the person on the other side of that conversation, and that goes both ways. I'm tempted to get into that discussion in more detail here, but that's not what this video is about. It was not okay for the freedom that makes this country what it is to be jeopardized and, in some cases, taken away during COVID. It really wasn't. Those efforts ended up being largely voluntary anyways. I don't think that any of the mandates, any of the requirements had a significant impact on slowing or changing the trajectory of that disease. What it may have done is significantly impacted some people's lives unfairly, because they held a belief strongly and they stuck with that belief, and they put their money where their mouth was, and they lost their jobs or their livelihood or something else. And speaking of that, somebody recently lost their life. The situation with Renee Good was complicated enough that although I feel her death was unjustified and unjustifiable, I won't spend time making that case here, because I recognize that the situation was complicated enough that it's not an argument I want to get into. And it's really something I will mostly leave alone. I will tell you my opinion if you ask it. I have an opinion, but it's not one I'm going to try really hard to convince anybody of. It's just not that cut and dry. What happened to Alex Pretti is cut and dry. I've watched the whole video, the longest version that I was able to find so far. Something longer might come out at some point. And maybe I'll post it and post a link to it. I'm not sure. Check the description, maybe it'll be there. But I definitely see a man who is, I don't know if he was walking up and down the street watching for something to happen. He was a neighborhood watch participant. That goes back before ICE was in the streets. It may have been his habit. I don't know any of that. I don't know if he was out to grab some morning coffee, because what I see is someone who begins filming from a significant distance of the incident that's happening. And if you watch that long clip, you see that he maintained his distance very intentionally. You see that as things begin to happen, as the scene moves towards him, because it does move towards him, he doesn't move towards it. It moves towards him. The interaction that's taking place between an ICE agent and two women, they approach him. He's just happens to be where they are moving towards. And he initially steps back as that happens. He tries to maintain a certain distance. But when the first woman is shoved, actually in the long clip that I've seen, that person turns the phone towards the ground for a second as the woman is shoved. And when she lifts the phone back up, you see that she has her arm around Alex's waist, essentially, and he's kind of helping hold her up. He turns her away from the conflict and he begins to walk her away. It's clear that there was no intention from the ICE agent to arrest that woman, because he does not continue to approach her. He instead turns to the other woman, who's the woman who you can more prominently see being shoved in that clip. That's that's circulating and more easy to find. And he shoves that woman as hard as he can, and Alex does, and I want you to hear this. I hope I've gained your trust. I want you to hear this. Alex does what any man would instinctively do. Places himself between the person who just shoved her and her and begins to try to help her up off the ground. That woman was not under arrest, because an arrest never starts with shoving the person as far as possible away from yourself if you are the officer. She was not under arrest. What it looks like is the officer lost his temper, and we can have conversations about this. We can have honest conversations about what happened. We can have honest conversations about the amount of stress that officer might have been under, and maybe we can find some compassion for him despite everything that he did in that scene. It appears that he loses his temper. He shoves the woman as far as possible and as hard as possible. There's no indication of any intention to arrest her. There's no arrest to obstruct. I need you to hear this, and I hope that I have your trust. If this, is something that you're not willing to hear from somebody who doesn't care about anything that you care about, and you just want to be, adversarial about it and confrontational about it and disagree about it. This is not something we need to disagree on as Americans. We don't need to demonize anybody, not even the agent who shot Alex, not even the agent who shoved the woman and pepper sprayed him continuously as he helped her up, or tried to. But we can acknowledge the chain of events and the reality of what happened, and we should acknowledge it. Truth is important. We saw Alex ignore being pepper sprayed, and admirably so. I don't think a lot of people could take being pepper sprayed directly in the face for that long and stay focused on trying to help the woman up, not on turning towards the agent ever. Beyond the initial moment when he sees the woman being pushed, his first motion is to turn towards the agent, but he almost immediately turns away to help the woman up. His hand is raised, indicating, first of all, the classic position of I'm not a threat to you, and is partially to kind of try to block the pepper spray a little bit, but he keeps his hand raised until the agent pulls it down, and it's clear there's nothing in it. There's no threatening motion from him whatsoever. He did not attend, to make this clear, he did not attend a protest with a weapon. He was just out and about. He's someone who carries. He didn't bring it there, or at least there's no indication or reason to believe that he brought it there with any sort of intention other than to carry, like is his habit, presumably. And him losing his life was not justified. It was in infringement on his civil rights, start to finish, starting before he was shot, because there was no reason for him to be assaulted at all. He hadn't approached the agent at all. The motion came to him. He responded nothing more than what any man would do to protect a woman without ever indicating any intention of harm towards the agent or any motion that could even be interpreted that way by a reasonable analysis. And by all means, by the time he was dragged to the ground, he was certainly, at that point, fully turned away from the agents, had been for a minute, was focused only on one thing, which was helping that woman. This, I could go on, but I won't. His rights mattered. His life mattered. And the action of infringing on the rights of Americans should be of utmost concern to all of us in any situation when it happens, and not this one. It will not. My care about this topic will not end just because this situation resolves. There'll always be something else, right? Hopefully there won't be. Hopefully we'll have a period of time where we don't have to have these types of conversations. But when we do have to have them, may we have them. And let's not demonize each other in the process. But also, let's be honest, and let's be realistic. That goes both ways. It goes for all of us on both sides. We all lose when we get into these conversations and arguments emotionally and more determined to prove somebody wrong than to be honest, stay focused on what matters, treat each other with respect in the process, and come to an understanding, including working through, those sources of bitterness that go back to COVID or maybe go back to something else. This is an opportunity for all of us to fix our mindsets, not just the ones of us who are in the right now on this particular issue. This is bigger than that. It's an opportunity for all of us to fix our mindsets and see our blind spots and let ourselves be corrected, not just look for a chance to correct others. And I'm saying that as someone who is not perfect with it, but it's important to say, and I'm trying my best here. Thanks for watching this. I really appreciate it if you watch this, because saying this is really important to me. And I feel that I did a somewhat decent job of it. I hope I did. So thank you for watching this, and I'll talk to you later.